get all caught up with us. Hello, I think they're caught up with us. Right. Okay, folks, welcome to the live stream. Well, very glad to have you on this inaugural episode, on this inaugural recording for the Insanely Profitable Tech podcast. So you're here at the beginning. Don't know how many there will be, but you know what? On the other podcast I do, we've had 300 episodes. So maybe we'll go half as long as that. That would be wonderful. And we couldn't start better than by having Johanna with us. I'm going to do a proper introduction when we do the podcast part. But before we start doing the podcast part, I just want to emphasize to those of you watching me, hearing me now, you guys have preference. So I have a bunch of questions for Johanna. We'll not be bored. We have tons to talk about. But we want to hear from you listening to this podcast. So jump in with questions and thoughts and arguments and debates. We love to see those, and we'd love to see them live. And you get to go first. People who came and registered and just gave us their question, we'll get to them. But people like Fortune, who's here. Hi, Fortune. Nice to see you. And we're very glad you're here. Please ask questions and don't hesitate and wait for us. Don't think, oh, I have to wait until they say that we can ask a question. You're here. You're live. We want to be here for you. So throw in your questions and comments as we go. No matter how much you disagree with us, that's the best way. That's the best way to figure out how to get your budget for anything, which is what we're going to be talking about. Okay, with that preamble, I'm now going to do a brief podcast introduction. There will also be a break at the middle when we come to the end of the first episode and go to the second. But we'll just be continuing, so nothing will shift except how we distribute the podcast later. Okay, so I'm now going to do the introduction and get ready for that. Welcome back to the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast. But you know, I shouldn't say welcome back because this is the first episode and you found us at the very inauguration of this insanely profitable journey we're going to go on together. I'm Squirrel. I'm your host. I run the Squirrel Squadron. This is a project of the Squadron. And the Squirrel Squadron is all about getting tech and non-tech people together to figure out how to make their technology insanely profitable. And if you want to do that with me, then you found the right place. Now, what I'm most interested in doing is introducing you to my colleague Johanna here, who's our first guest. Our podcast is all about talking with people like Johanna, who are amazing users of technology. Johanna, I think, has a technological background, but the main thing that you learn from Johanna is how to use technology, how to make it effective for you, how to work with your technology team. And Johanna has been doing that for way more years than any of us could possibly imagine. Tons of mistakes she's made in her life, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And she's able to use those mistakes, those ideas, that learning, to put them into more books than I can count on running your technology team, managing those crazy engineers, getting the right results out of them, managing your product. And she's even written a couple of novels, I think, as well. So Johanna is an incredibly prolific author and writer and thinker. And I'm really, really pleased to have her here on the inaugural episode of the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast. Hi, Johanna.
Thank you very much, Squirrel, and I am delighted to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're really glad to have you here. Our topic for today, and we're probably going to wind up covering lots of other fun stuff as well, because once we get going, we have lots of material, but and combined experience. But what we're going to focus on is how to get budget. And one of the biggest challenges that I often see is somebody will come to me and say, Squirrel, we have this crazy idea. You know, I just got off the phone with a company in Germany that for years has had super ideas for their product, but they thought they were going to kill their product. They thought they were going to do a new exciting thing. They were all working on the new exciting thing. And the old product, we're not going to do anything. We won't invest in that. But there were people working on that product for years and years. I don't know why they didn't quit, to be honest, because they couldn't get the attention of the executives who were setting the budgets, and therefore couldn't add things to that product that would have made customers really happy, that would have advanced their new product, that would have let them move into new markets. And so this is a consistent challenge I hear about. We talk about it on the Squirrel Squadron forum, where people talk about the challenges they have even finding the committee that might make the decision to give them the budget. I hear about it from the people that I'm coaching. And Johanna, I know you hear about it all the time. How do you look at this problem when somebody says, I just can't get budget for this? What's your philosophy about it? How do you frame the problem?
Well, the first thing I ask is this sufficiently valuable to anybody? Right? I mean, should we do that's the zeroth question in the project portfolio management idea. How should we do this at all? And
Hmm.
while some of us might say, I got this great idea, I would really like to do it, is it valuable for the customers or is it valuable for the people doing the work? I often see that there is tremendous value in for the people doing the work. If they can get this, if we can somehow automate our pipeline of delivery, right? Pipeline of delivery means the customers get the value faster. It's not a direct customer piece of value.
No
It's
one ever
indirect.
asked you to make a better pipeline. They never come to you and say, I'd like to pay you for a better pipeline. But they do
No,
say, I'd like to pay you to get the things to me faster so I can make more money from my customers.
right. And that is the kind of project that too few leaders in the organization recognize the value of. So if this is something that would make everybody's tech lives easier to produce value faster, that's a way to make that argument. But if you only have a really good idea, then you can often get money to experiment, even if you cannot get money for the entire project. And that all ties together. We often don't know what our customers really need. We have suspicions, and we often don't realize the value of doing these in-house projects that make the pipeline delivery faster, right? And so can we can we do something that allows us to make just a little progress and get some answers from that progress? That's the way I often find it's really worth framing this problem.
Fantastic. Now, one thing that my clients will often come to me with is exactly this kind of idea that they've had, which is beneficial to them. And they say, look, in our team, we know that we have a blocker. We have to wait for this other group to give us a machine on which we can run our new software and test it out with the customer. Or we need to wait for someone else to do something. We need to do that, and we don't have a way around it. What do you do to break the logjam? How do you get the people who are in charge of the resources to give those resources to you instead of hanging on to them and blocking your way?
So this is where I start with both data and a story.
Mm-hmm.
Data by itself never changes anybody's mind.
Mm-hmm.
But a story around that data that can start to change people's minds. So that's when I say, Team A, right, our colleagues across the organization have this job to do, and they are blocking us. Not because they're bad people, but here's the cycle time, and I often measure cycle time as a way to start with this conversation. Right? We thought it was going to take us a week.
Johanna, can I just ask
Yeah,
you? Some listeners won't know what cycle time is. Could you define it for them?
sure. Cycle time is the time from the time you start something until it gets out of out of the organization. Right? Sometimes you have a handoff as to this other team. That's not sufficient for measuring cycle time in this scenario. You need to figure out how much additional time does that other team need to deliver it to the customers. Because if you can have a cycle time of 2 days, but if you have to wait every 2 weeks for the deployment people, your cycle time is 2 days plus all that time that they take to deliver to the customers or outside the organization.
So Johanna, you're really emphasizing something that's near and dear to my heart, but maybe unfamiliar to listeners: the importance of speed in building customer value. Because often people say, look, I just don't want to wait. I want to get it. I want it now. And when you ask them why, they say, I'm just an impatient person. I feel like I'd like to have it. but that's not a business justification. And what I'm pushing my clients all the time to do, and I think you also have this philosophy, is make sure you have a business reason for wanting to go fast. Why is cycle time being low going to help you? Why is getting customer feedback quickly going to help you? There are cases where it won't, but Johanna, you and I could probably count those on the fingers of one hand. The number of times when somebody says, actually, it doesn't matter whether we get this to the customer quickly or not, we'll get paid the same either way. That almost never happens. And once you put it in terms of speed and speed of delivery and speed of outcome, you get tremendous business value and tremendous attention. Am I off track? Is that how you see it?
Oh, you're totally on track. That's because the faster you can deliver value, the more customers you can attract, and the more these customers tend to spend at least earlier, right? So even if you have pay for a product as opposed to a subscription, just imagine, right? You release your product in January. You want all of the possible customers to buy in February, right? That would be fabulous, and you get this whole chunk of money at the beginning of February. But what if you don't actually really? Well, what if you then realize half the customers want one more thing? And then they would be reference accounts, they would buy more licenses, they would do all kinds of things to really increase the value of that customer over time. Now, if you could not get that one more thing until June, that postpones all of that additional revenue until June. What if you
Now,
could get it? What if you could get it in the middle of February or even the 1st of March? Now you have advanced your additional revenue by months.
Now, Johanna, we have some wonderful questions that are coming in from people watching us. And of course, some people are also listening to us on the podcast. You can put in your questions in the Squirrel Squadron forum as a follow-up. Johanna is a proud member there, and so am I, of course, as its founder. So if you have more questions, we're going to deal with a great one from Fortune in just a minute. But if you have questions, you can always ask them right now in the chat, or if you're picking this up on a recording later, put them in the forum, send them to me by email. We love questions. They're really fantastic. And Fortune has one that I just couldn't have paid him to come up with. So Fortune, we really appreciate it. Fortune says, how do you recommend talking to PMO, portfolio, or finance about changing to drip budgeting or even beyond budgeting? Now, these are some particular methods of budgeting, which might help the whole organization. But I'm going to ask a broader question first and then come back to Fortune's question and specialize. My question is, how on earth do you talk to those CFO people? Because they all talk about cash flow and balance sheets and other kinds of complicated financial ideas. Engineers ain't so good at that. And if I'm a CEO and I want the finance and I want the tech people to collaborate, I'm not going to have a good day. It's not going to be easy in most organizations to get those folks talking. And I'm guessing that Fortune might be on the tech side a bit. And Fortune is trying to talk to these finance people. How can Fortune do that effectively?
So this notion of I just spoke about cost of delay, right? Mm-hmm. That's actually the name for delaying the revenue. And what Fortune is asking is, how can we make this? How can we move from yearly budgeting, which I really wish I knew of a time when that actually made sense. It has not made sense since the 70s or 80s.
I would say this since the 1770s, when you had to get around, get around in carriages with horses. We've been moving faster than that since the telegraph.
Right. So one thing that you can do if you're a tech person and you don't know about capitalization versus operational expenses, learn about that. Right. Well, I'm not going to go into the depths of that. The first thing I would do is to talk to the CFO and ask him or her this question. How fast would you like to see more revenue? And they almost always say, tomorrow, today. this morning at 9 a.m., right? How can you even ask me that question? So that's when that gives you a little entry point into saying, if we can decouple the money assignment from the project portfolio, we can make better decisions more often about the project portfolio, and then we can give you probably more money, more revenue faster, because we are not stuck in this coupling of the assignment of money to the project portfolio. We can
Oh,
then change our minds and change the mix of projects.
and here's the crucial thing that I think so many of my clients get stuck on, and I don't think Fortune's stuck here. So Fortune's wise enough to be asking this question, but it's going to affect a lot of others. And Fortune, your friends may get stuck on this. Is it's so difficult so often to connect the things that we're doing day to day as programmers or marketers or customer service people, wherever you are in a larger organization. It's hard to connect those things to value. It's hard to connect them to an outcome. Now that seems surprising. How on earth could it possibly be that I'm here writing code for this or updating a database for that, and someone has not told me how those are connected to value and what a customer is going to pay for? But the great thing is that you don't have to wait. If you're in Fortune's shoes, or if you're working in the operations department, doesn't matter which part of the company you're in, you can always play what I call the why game. And the why game works very simply. So, Johanna, I'm going to play the why game with you if it's okay. Imagine you're a developer in an organization, one of the many that you've coached and worked with and you've written so many books about. And I'm going to ask you, Johanna, what are you doing today?
I'm
Make
working
something up.
on project I'm working on project A.
Excellent. And why are you working on Project A?
Because my boss told me to.
And why does your boss care about it?
Oh, it's on his list of deliverables.
Yeah. And where did that list come from? Why does somebody want you to deliver those things?
This is where I'm going to interrupt for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
second.
yeah.
This is where a lot of developers don't make the connection between the project portfolio and why your boss wants you to deliver this. So,
Exactly.
one, I do this a lot in organizations. I think you do too, Squirrel, where I say, how will this project make our customers' lives better? And then if the developer has no way of knowing that, now this is where the manager and the developer and everything can talk about. I should say everyone can talk about what is the overarching goal for this product, for the product strategy. What is the overarching goal for the corporate strategy? How do we link all of those strategy ideas to what I am doing today?
Yep. And if you can't, then you either might be working on something not so valuable, might not be a good idea to work on it, or you've lost the why game. Because I used to
Right.
walk around and I would go to developers like you were pretending to be, Johanna. Thank you for playing my game. And I would ask them, and they would get stuck just where you said developers get stuck. And they'd say, well, I don't really know why my boss cares about this. And I'd say, I just lost the why game. You didn't, but I lost because I was the CTO of that relatively small company. I hadn't communicated directly to them what the reason was. In a larger company, it might be more steps, but you want
Right.
to make sure that someone like Fortune can turn to the CFO and say, I know your language. I know that we're trying to move into China and start to sell to people in China on our product. And I know something that could accelerate that. How soon would you like it? And that's such a different way of conversing with them. Now, coming back to Fortune's question, which was, hey, how do I get people doing budgeting differently? The way you talk to them about doing a budget that might be different, and Fortune told a great story. I won't take the time for it, but go and read it in the comments. Fortune describes, asking for budget, and somebody says, oh, it's already been allocated. That's crazy, right? I have a
Right.
way to make this project get done faster, and we get into China faster, or we get into this new market, we get into this new, we can reduce costs, whatever it is we're trying to do in financial terms, because Fortune's won the why game now, we're imagining. And then Fortune can say, and this is a route to that. And here's the connection. Here's how it would work. And I need this much budget to make that happen. And that kind of conversation is really, really different. I hope that's helpful to Fortune in not only changing budget practices, but actually delivering in a different way. That's what I'd hope. Fortune says, I've met portfolio managers who couldn't tell you why this project exists anymore or how it relates to the customer. Yeah, well, that's a problem. And
Well,
either,
and that's often a problem because the money got allocated. Notice my use of passive voice, right? The money got allocated. No one
mysterious
will
hand of God. It just came from nowhere. We don't know where.
no one will claim credit for that anymore because they don't they everyone, almost everyone, realizes this is no longer valuable, but they have no mechanism for changing the value and changing the mix of projects in the project portfolio. This is one of the many reasons I suggest to everybody that they no longer they stop planning for any more than a quarter in advance. If you maybe you have to plan the portfolio for an entire quarter, okay, don't allocate any more money than for that quarter, right?
Now,
Keep it to a quarter at a time.
That sounds great, Johanna, but let me challenge you on that because I'm going to use a special case. This is a way of cheating, right? Because Johanna's right for most cases, but I have a client with a special case, and I wonder what you think about this one. So my client works in the space industry. So it's not Elon Musk. Don't worry. I'm not a big fan. It's not SpaceX, but somebody who works in that industry and provides services to those folks. And you know what? When you build rockets and you're going to the moon or Mars, I hope Elon gets to Mars and then stays there. But if you're going to Mars, you have to make sure Mars is there, which means that you have to launch at a certain time, down to the millisecond sometimes, years in advance. You have to make that kind of plan. So what do folks do who are in that kind of situation? I have construction folks who are building skyscrapers. There's longer term plans there because of good business reasons. So shouldn't they budget for those longer periods?
They can budget the minimum needed for those long lead items, right? This is where those are almost always programs, not a project, right?
Yep.
A program is a collection of several projects. In these cases, many, many projects. We're all focused on one business deliverable. And you might have to get, there are some kinds of projects where the legal issues persist for months and months and months. So you break the budget apart. Instead of having this really convoluted budget, which is always wrong in the entire program, instead say, we will continue to fund the legal part of this budget, or I don't even know what you call it, the platform for a skyscraper. There's an architectural name for that. I don't know what that is. Right.
And the superstructure, the foundation, I'm not sure, something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know the name. And also, you might have to fund for those space people the ongoing mathematical updates, because I just read somewhere the Earth is a millisecond faster due to climate change. I mean, there's some stuff like that. I don't know enough about the technical details. I do know.
Nor do I, to be honest. I'm a generalist. I work with people in every industry, but I do know that these folks in these certain industries have to plan for physical reasons. They're in the physical world, so there are physical constraints for which they have to plan. But what you're saying is that you can budget for the parts where you have to, but then you can be much more flexible on the parts which are normally software. They're normally the high tech that we're talking about. That can be more flexible, and therefore you can budget in a more granular way. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. We got another question. I want to sneak it into this episode before we do the split. By the way, people listening to us live, we're going to do a split of the podcast in a moment. We'll come to the end of the podcast part, and we'll then do the second episode. So we're not going anywhere. We'll be here for the whole hour. But we have another question, and sometimes I can't see who it is. So whoever you are, I don't know. But if I know you, hello. And if I don't, welcome. And this person says, how would you go about explaining the need to allocate budget, both in terms of human costs and dollar costs, for projects that are purely technical in nature? Oh, this is my favorite one. These are great. Wonderful. I did not pay this person to ask this question, but it's perfect. Projects with most of us in technical roles would badly call technical debt. Okay, now that's a topic that we know and love, and Johanna, you and I have heard that so many times since I think it was Ward Cunningham invented it in 1999 or something. So tell us, what would you do to help non-technical people understand the benefit of something purely technical to cure their technical debt?
So I like to call technical debt a mortgage with a balloon payment at the end, because this is, you can kind of maneuver around unfinished work, right? Or real honest technical debt, as opposed to cruft, which is ickiness in the form of code and tests, right? Whatever you call it, you can maneuver around it for a while. The problem is when it comes due um, at the worst possible time for the maximum number of customers, with all of the implications for all of the teams. And so it's just like a balloon mortgage. So if you have a balloon mortgage for, I'm going to call it $100,000. I know you're in the UK, so you would think in pounds, but
We have listeners all over the world. Dollars will make
okay,
sense to them. Go ahead.
yeah. So you have a down payment of $2,000. Your balloon payment, if you do not pay it down over the next 2 or 3 years, will be, if I got this right, $98,000. Right? Did I? If I did that
I
right?
think your math is right. It's good enough. Keep going.
Good
It's
enough.
not a maths
So,
test.
right. So the idea is you would pay this off a few thousand on a yearly basis, and then after 5 years, you're supposed to have enough income to really pay this off. But just imagine if you don't pay any of it off in the next 5 years. Not only does your interest increase, in effect, your principal increases also, because you have taken on even more technical debt. So I like to do more scenarios, right? These stories with my customers, the CFO, the CEO, the CTO, whomever I can get the ear of in senior leadership, and say, we managed to maneuver around this the last time. Here are, and if I'm talking to the CTO, I might actually use some examples of what we did, right? But one organization I worked with years and years ago did a whole bunch of copy paste. So their code base ballooned when, and because they copy pasted, they ballooned the number of defects.
Because
And
when they copied and pasted the code that had the old code that had the defect, also there was a bug in the new code because you
right,
pasted it. It's like if
right,
you wanted to make your novel longer and you just copy chapter 1 to chapter 7. Well, if a character has the wrong name in chapter 1, they're going to have the wrong name in chapter 7. So when you go
yeah,
back and edit, you're going to be in the same boat. Then you're going to have to
right,
do twice the work. Yeah, makes sense. I want
exactly.
to throw in something here from Fortune
Okay.
again. So Fortune's come in with a thought here that I really want to get Johanna's reaction to. Personally, I've always asked the devs, says Fortune, what requested feature can't be built or upgraded or extended due to the technical debt. Then we go explain that to the portfolio, or better yet, the key stakeholder. So Johanna, how would that work? Does that fit in with what you're saying, or does it not match?
That's another way to do it, which I think is really great, because my way was thinking, we can just continue sort of as we are, but we have more and more and more defects. This is a really, Fortune's idea is a really fabulous way of saying, you know, we cannot we cannot attach any more scaffolding to this product.
And
We
it's
are
hitting us
done.
right now. This thing
Right,
that you want to get money for is delayed because the scaffolding is on scaffolding is on scaffolding, and we can't get to the building anymore. And
right.
that's the sort of story that is live and immediate for the CFO and really can get that person's attention. So I agree with Johanna. That works really well. Johanna, I have another idea I often hear, which is, you know what we really should do is we should just stop all our development work. We should come to an end. Yeah, exactly. This is my reaction. We should just make sure everybody has to wait just for a month or two. It'll be real quick.
Oh,
We'll just get it all fixed. Yeah, exactly. You've heard this story before.
those of
What?
you on the podcast, I'm tearing my hair out.
Yes,
Yeah.
she is. Yep. So tell us what's wrong with that philosophy? Why doesn't that work?
So that means the organization cannot make any more money from delivery of value as they proceed. And these projects never take 2 months. Never, 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 never. Now, you can use the big ball of mud pattern to start taking pieces away from this big ball of mud code, test whatever you have, and that allows you to replace pieces of the code base. But stopping work, even if it's just for 2 months, I have never seen it take just 2 months. More often
Me
it
either.
takes, yeah,
Johanna, can you guess how long the longest one I've ever seen is?
2 years.
7 years. I had a
Oh,
client who came in. They said, we've been trying to replace version 1 every year up until Christmas, because it was a retail business. Christmas was a big
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And they'd try just before Christmas, and they'd fail every year for 6 years. And then the 7th year, we got it done. So if you're thinking of stopping the world, don't. That doesn't work. I think
No.
that's how we'll conclude this episode of the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast. But live listeners, stick around, because we're recording 2 together here. But if you're on the podcast, you're going to have to wait a little bit, or go find the live recording and pick up more wisdom and ideas from Johanna, because we got like 20 questions sitting in the queue here that we're going to deal with, because there's so much more we can say about how to get your budget, how to get anybody to agree to anything where they need to give you money for business value. That's where we can really give value. Johanna, tell folks where they can find you.
Everything is at jrothman.com. JROTHMAN.com. My books, my blogs, newsletter, everything.
Fantastic. And I'm on squirrelsquadron.com. This is a project of my community, the Squirrel Squadron. And you can find us there anytime at squirrelsquadron.com for more discussion and more events like this. And of course, there'll be more episodes of the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast coming soon. Welcome to the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast. Live listeners, if you're confused, that's because we're just recording the second one right now. And listeners at home, we're glad to have you here talking with my fantastic guest, Johanna Rothman, who has written, I don't know, is it 30 or 40 books? How many are you up to now, Johanna? Have you kept
20,
count?
20 nonfiction.
20 nonfiction. Okay, plus all her novels. So Johanna writes on every topic you can imagine related to great use of technology and getting the most profit out of the technology that you have. And that's exactly what we talk about here on the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast. So we're very glad to have Johanna back. Welcome back, Johanna.
Thank you. I am again delighted to be here.
Excellent. So I have a queue of questions, and we also have live listeners, as I said, who may be jumping in with their questions. But we had a whole bunch of folks very excited about hearing Johanna's thoughts on this topic of how to get budget for nearly anything and how to connect it to the business value. So I'm going to just start throwing some of those questions into the mix. And at the top here, we have one from Stephen. And Stephen asks, how can I justify a separate budget for internal tools in software development? What should I measure? So I'm very curious about this. It's a little different from the one we dealt with in the last episode, where we were talking about how do I get a budget for technical debt, or how do I get budget for a project that's technical in nature. Stephen wants like a better integrated development environment, or maybe like a more comfortable desk, or better tools for dealing with cleaning data for a data warehouse, that kind of thing. And very properly says, well, wait a minute, how do I measure that in business terms? How can I show that to the CFO and say, if you buy the latest version of Databricks, we will get this result? How do you do that, Johanna?
So I think that for some of these, especially software tools, it's an easier way to connect the tool with the eventual cycle time. I mean, tools often we often need to learn how to use the tools to really use them effectively. But um, let me give you an example. I don't teach TDD, and that I have colleagues who do, and that's terrific. TDD is test driven development.
Thank you.
And
Some of our
often,
listeners won't know that. It's a particular development practice. It's a very good one, but it takes some time to learn it. Go ahead.
and there's often a tool that you use for the particular language. So you might say, let me just say, you decide, Stephen decides he wants to teach his 25 technical people all about TDD. So he brings in one of our colleagues who will teach TDD and recommend a variety of possible unit testing tools, and that whole thing, let's just call it, will be $20,000. Now,
Yep.
is this the right number? No, it's a possibility of numbers, but
Mhm.
it's reasonably close to what I think it would be. And now that that is not specifically software that will help immediately. It will be a function of a better production over time, right? Better, fewer defects, better, faster value, all that stuff. So what I would measure now is how many defect escapes do we have now? How many of those do our customers find? Now, if our customers find them first, that's very embarrassing, and not even just embarrassing, it's very costly, right?
Exactly.
So
And we have a beautiful example from the headlines just a few weeks before where our recording of this podcast, where about 8 million machines around the world suddenly had a blue screen instead of whatever they were supposed to do. And that was because somebody didn't do enough testing to verify that what they were about to push the button on would kill all these computers. So that's the kind of example you want to have to hand. And we've had some questions here where people are asking, how can I make this case? How can I describe it? And what you want to have is examples like that, maybe not so egregious, even better examples from your actual system where you can say, you
oh
know,
yeah,
those people who phoned you and were really angry that their entire data was wiped out and their whole team couldn't work. That would be something that we would avoid if we invested in this way. So now Stephen also asks how we measure. So how does Stephen show? Maybe Stephen's got the budget and now he's investing regularly in test-driven development or improved skills for the developers, whatever it is. How does he, on an ongoing basis, say, yes, let's keep paying for this?
so that's where looking at the various project and product measures matter.
Mm-hmm.
So, how fast is the product to run? How is the product running fast enough? How many crashes does the product have? Right? There are various product based measures that I would expect to mostly go down in terms of bad things, right? Defect escapes, the implication of defects.
Mm-hmm.
I would also expect customer more customers to buy the product because it is more stable, it has better user interface, whatever it is that we are doing, right? So I would
But
expect,
Johanna, you're describing business metrics. I just want to underline this. You're not
yes,
describing like lines of code written or
no,
number of code reviews or
no,
something like that. And what our server costs. It might be server costs would be relevant, but not like how many servers we can set up. You're describing what are outcomes for the business that matter to them, which is why we go back to what we said in the last episode. It's so important to understand what those important drivers are.
right. And that's why it's so important to say what matters to your senior leadership,
Mm-hmm.
right? You and I have been focused on the speed of customer delivery, right? The speed of value to the customer, because that's most often what I see. Every so often, though, especially you had used an example in the previous version, the previous podcast of space people,
Yep.
right?
People
And
building
large
SpaceX. Elon Musk.
large
Yep.
construction people. That is not so much speed, but having a full product that works and works reliably. right? So reliability is one of those things that many of us, especially in software as a service, tend not to focus on, but hard goods, hard products, they really need reliability. And there are ways to measure that. So, all of the kinds of tools that people need would would fall under those business metrics. Now, you had also said, what about desks for people and chairs?
Yeah,
Um,
but maybe they just need more comfortable environments in which to work, so they don't make as many bugs, they don't make as many mistakes.
Well, I one of the best things I did as a project manager back in the late 90s, I was a contract project manager for a local company in the Boston area. And the architect could not come into work more than 2 or 3 days a week. So I asked him, what's wrong? He was going to doctors, he was going to physical therapy, chiropractic, um, all these people who could help fix his back. So I said, do you need something at work that would help fix your back? Like a better chair? He had one of those terrible old fashioned roll across wooden chairs, as opposed to the kind of chair I'm sitting in now, which is
Yeah,
totally ergonomic.
I live in my 600-year-old house and I have a chair to match, but I survive with
Yeah,
it. I'm okay. I don't have back problems. But
right,
this guy obviously needed a chair like yours, not like mine.
right. So, and of course, it was something like $600 or a lot of money in quotes for
Hmm.
the time.
Yeah,
And
but
so
how
I
much were
said,
you losing from him not being there?
exactly. So I counted up just for the past 4 weeks how many days of work he had missed. And because this was the 90s and he was flat on his back, even if he had been able to hook up Zoom or anything, he would not have been able to work. He was literally flat on his back. He was in so much pain. So I said, here's what this guy has missed in terms of the number of days. Here's the cost of the chair. Notice you can get back the cost of the chair inside of 1 week, right? 1 week return. And that was all the CFO needed.
There you go.
So
So I think the answer to Stephen's question is measure things that are meaningful to the CFO. If you're not sure what those are, go back to last time's episode, go back a bit, because we just talked about it there, how you discover what's important to the CFO, and then talk about the return on investment, because Johanna's made a very good point there that you need to understand how long is this investment going to pay off. Because if you're making a huge investment, if that chair had cost $20,000 or $100,000, if he needed something that fancy, maybe we need to find a different solution, because that one wouldn't pay off. But a $600 chair pays off nearly instantly. And so it's
right.
really a no-brainer for the CFO. And you want to get into your CFO's brain, to, or whoever it is who's making your budget decisions and giving you the budget, you want to be in their brain ready to help them. By the way, we have lots of people listening who make budgets, who are our CFOs, who are doing this on the other end. And the thing you could do the most that would be really helpful is to explain this stuff. Explain what return on investment is. Don't assume that engineers know what that means. Don't assume that someone like Stephen, I'm sure Stephen probably knows, but someone like Stephen who asked this question might not understand some of these issues. And if you explain it to them and say, here's how you could make this case to me that would be better, rather than showing up and saying, the developers are all miserable, they want new toys. That doesn't play very well with me. And if you put it this way, it will be better. A little bit of education goes a long way. And the great thing is that I've seen engineers really, really take to that. Technical people really appreciate rules and guidelines, and giving it to them can really help. Okay, I'm going to move on. I want to make sure we get some more questions in, because we had some really great ones. We have one from Francis. Francis is actually in China and has translated my book into Chinese without me even knowing it. So Francis is amazing. Francis says, sometimes it's difficult. It really ties in well here. Francis says, sometimes it's difficult to see real-time or short-term results from certain investments in technology management. However, due to the current economic situation, there's always a current economic situation. I can't remember a time when there wasn't a current economic situation.
Right.
Managers are particularly eager to see immediate or short-term returns. Guess what? They're always keen to get immediate and short-term returns. How should this contradiction be addressed, or how can we help both sides align as much as possible? Johanna, what do you do when your manager says, "Can't I get a payoff today?" And you say, "It doesn't work like that."
So that's where I'm going to go back to cycle time, right?
Mm-hmm.
The time it takes for you or your team to start something and release it to the customers. How many feedback loops do you need in that time, and where? Are they all inside the team? And we can make the team, I should say, we can ask the team to work a little bit differently, or because I'm going to rant about HR and promotions and raises
Okay,
right
we'll come
now.
back to Francis's question. Francis, hang on, don't worry.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I want to
going
hear
to
this
that.
rant from Johanna because I bet I
Yeah.
agree. Go ahead.
Yeah. So right now, everybody has to report in cost accounting terms, right? Cost accounting says we can account for what one person does and see what their value is for the entire organization.
It's
First, that,
reductionist. It's if
yeah,
only people were gears, then we could say, "Oh, this gear has the right ratio, and that gear doesn't quite have the right ratio. Bang on it a while till it's the right, and we'll oil that gear." If only people worked that way, it would be so nice.
yeah. And nobody works that way at all. So one of the problems we have in organizations is that HR, because of the reward system, focuses on individual work. If we ask the team to collaborate, we can often reduce the cycle time and reduce the various feedback loops. Now, this requires um, probably HR to agree with us at some level, because we nobody wants to give up their promotion and their raise for the good of somebody else's either promotion or raise, even if it helps the product, right? So we have to start looking at how do we help the product by collaborating as a team, right? I will leave the CTO and the CFO and the CEO. I I would love to have a conversation with all of you folks about how to do this. So in the meantime, Francis, you can decrease the cycle time if people on the team collaborate, right? That's the very first thing that I often start there. Now, if
And
you
that
have
gives an immediate return. So Francis
that's
was asking, how do I deal with it when what I want to do has a longer term return? The answer is actually start with something that has an immediate return. Stick to that because it ain't going to change the desire
right,
for the immediate return. But then you
right,
can use it. I think that's where you're going, Johanna. You can then use that improvement in short term return to create the longer term benefit.
right. In fact, I just finished listening to your podcast with Jeffrey about the Toyota Kana,
Oh, great.
and the
We'll
continual.
link to that in the show notes and in the forum post that will go out as a result of this. So keep going.
Okay, so if you collaborate as part of a team, you might realize you need to collaborate a little bit more outside. You can use the same principles of how do we shorten our feedback loops to inside the team with people outside the team. And that might be your product leader, it might be other people. Your product leader should be inside the team. That's a different problem altogether. But you can use the principles of whatever you do to reduce cycle time now in the small and expand those ever more outside the small.
Exactly. So Francis, I hope that's helpful. And to if you come back and you're on the forum, so you're very welcome to ask more follow-up questions, Johanna, and I can look at them. If you have a specific example, we could take that and say, here's the long-term investment you want to make. You didn't say quite what it was, and then how would you use faster cycle time to get that? But there's lots of different ways to slice that elephant, so to speak. And we'd love to talk more about that. So please feel free, folks who are here, to ask that question, or Francis to give us an example on the forum. I suspect Francis is sleeping right now. I think it's nighttime in China. So, but I do want to come back to something else that Johanna mentioned, and I'm also going to put that in the show notes and in the forum post. And that is a wonderful article by the Poppendieks. They've retired now, this husband and wife pair, but they still have their article up on why it has a better title, but it's essentially why we shouldn't give bonuses to individuals in tech teams, because there's never a single person who did the heroic job. Even if there was somebody who stayed up all night and got it ready for the client, there were 7 other people who made that possible. And trying to divide that up is a fool's game and doesn't work. So if you want to give your HR folks something, sort of a rocket to get their attention, that article is very well written and has stood the test of time. I think it's 20 years old now.
Well,
okay.
I actually wrote about this in my Modern Management Made Easy books.
Oh, great.
I have a whole section on why performance reviews are stupid and don't work and what you can do instead. I'll send
Wonderful.
you that
Okay,
link.
great. So we have the up-to-date version and we have the old version, both of which are
Yes.
valuable. It's like wine, right? It's good either way. So I'm just making a note to put that in. Good. I want to try to get to at least one more question.
Yeah.
And that's a really great one from Vic. It's great not only because of its content, but because of its brevity. But I think we'll have a lot to say about it. Vic says, how do you stimulate innovation with scarcity? And I think that's just so provocative. I'm just going to hand that to you, Joanna, to see if you can knock that out of the park.
So I used to think of innovation as needing all kinds of degrees of freedom. And then I started to write fiction. And I often have to write to a prompt, right? If I want a specific editor to buy my story, right? This is a customer, I have to write to a specific prompt. And that means I have a bounding box. I cannot step outside that bounding box and expect my editor to buy my story. This is exactly the same in technical product development, right? We almost never have unlimited degrees of freedom. So
You can't write, just to go back to your fiction example, you can't write, Bob and Sonia were having a wonderful time together, having a romantic date, and then the aliens landed in the front garden. If that happens in your novel, it might be a great novel, but ain't going to be bought by the romance fiction author, editors, right? So you've got to stay in bounds. And I think what you're saying is that we have the same kind of boundary benefit in technology.
Right. So the more we think about, instead of trying to move outside of our bounds, what can we do inside our bounds to make this really worthwhile for our customers? Now, I am not going to say if you have a team of scarcity, right? You only have developers and not testers. I don't think that's not going to work. But I'm talking about while we don't have all of the tools we might want, we can still do something useful. While we might not have all the time we might need, that that I shouldn't say just that prompts me to say how thinly can we slice these stories so I can deliver something and get some feedback.
There
Right.
you go. And
it's all about that
Johanna,
first step.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's all about that first step in getting feedback. Okay.
There you go. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you, but I do have an idea I don't want to lose here, which is there's a tool I use with people I coach sometimes, and I think it illustrates what you're getting at there, and that is I force them to think about what is possible. You know, if somebody asks you to build a time machine, it doesn't matter how much scarcity or innovation or anything else you have, you ain't going to build a time machine because we don't know how and we think it's impossible. But what I ask them to do is to ask them, and I'll ask you, Johanna, have you ever seen the movie Independence Day?
I have not. No.
Okay, but you've probably seen a movie like it where the aliens come. We're back to aliens again, and they park spaceships over every city on the planet. And this is the only important part of Independence Day. The rest of the movie is terrible, but it's important for this example that the aliens show up. And in my example, they say, I want you to do something for us or we will blow up the earth. In the actual movie, they just start blowing up the earth. But that's just to make the movie exciting. But in my example that I use with developers or with anybody else, I say, now imagine they said that if you do not complete this release by Friday, or you do not build this new module or this new screen, we will blow up the earth. Now, my question is, do you run for the hills or try to get Elon to take you to Mars or something else? Or do you go and do something? What would you do? And typically when I put
something. Yeah.
Exactly. Because in almost every circumstance, unless you're building a time machine, there are some things that humanity could do in order to achieve this result, which is not being destroyed, right? And when you get people thinking about what's actually possible, then they'll say things like, well, I could build the screen, but we'd have human beings doing the responses and writing the emails that are supposed to come back. Well, heck, that might actually work. Maybe we should be innovative like that, get it in front of customers. This is the old Wizard of Oz trick. You have somebody behind the curtain imitating the computer, and you find out whether people want to buy it. Or they say, actually we could do it, but it would only work for 5 users at a time. It wouldn't work for thousands. Well, guess what? All I have to do is demo it to the CEO next week so that they don't cancel the contract. 5 users would be fine. Could we do that? And so I think that's creating artificial scarcity. My example creates, ultimate scarcity of life, and puts so much pressure on that people suddenly become innovative. Vic doesn't need to be that creative, doesn't need to push that hard. But I think we're both saying, Johanna, that Vic, you could ask your developers to work within their bounds, to work within the frame, to work within what limitations they have. And that actually forces creativity because they have to come up with something different. And actually, the right kind of developer, not everyone thinks this way, but the right kind of developer, the really creative and innovative, exciting ones, love that restriction. They love working in a difficult environment because it lets them show off more. It lets them come up with better ideas.
Well, and I find that the more constraints I have, the more my mind goes to really cool things.
Exactly. Okay. Now, I don't think we have enough time for another great question, but there's about 10 or 15, I don't know, that we got from people who registered and are listening or are listening on the recording. So what I want to encourage folks to do is come on over to the Squirrel Squadron forum. There'll be a link in the show notes and in the follow-up emails and so on. And there's a discussion there. Joanna and I will do our best to answer some of those questions, and we'd love to see more of them from you. But of course, you should also read every one of Johanna's 29 books. I'm not sure how many she's got, but there's a tremendous wealth of knowledge and resources here. We've only touched on budgeting, but for pity's sake, you've written an entire series on how to manage any type of team. So if Johanna doesn't know it, it's not worth knowing. It's my philosophy. Johanna, where can people find more Johanna and get in touch with you and read more of your books?
Everything is on jrothman, JROTHMAN.com.
Excellent. So I'm going to put that here on the screen for those who are watching. Let me just do that. And there we go. So that's up there. You just head on over to jrothman.com. And literally, I remember reading Behind Closed Doors, one of your early management books. And it was a complete eye-opener for me as a non-manager, somebody who'd never done it before. And you've just developed and gone strength to strength since then. So I recommend that book to everyone that I coach. And there's so many more that you can learn from Johanna with. And then I just want to point out where else you can get more of these episodes. I just have to spell it right. And that is squirrelsquadron.com. That's where there will be more episodes of the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast. And that's where you can find the forum I've been mentioning, where we have tech and non-tech people always discussing all of these kinds of questions, figuring out how to make the best use, how to make the most insanely profitable use of the technology that they have. And where I write a weekly email and lots of other material is available. And we have other events besides the podcast as well. So would love to see people on squirrelsquadron.com. Would love for you to click subscribe on the podcast. If you have a review, we'd love to see that. So tell us what you think, whether it's 1 star or 5. I want your feedback. How is this working for you? And I can tell you that our next guest on the podcast coming up in September is going to be the rock star of consulting, Alan Weiss. Who is relentlessly opposed to technology. He won't even use, he'll use Zoom, but he won't use like Calendly or something to book a Zoom. So he's quite a curmudgeon, but also an insanely profitable user of technology. He's built a huge business, taught hundreds and thousands of people around the world how to build their businesses. And we're going to be learning a ton from Alan. So looking forward to seeing you in September for the Insanely Profitable Tech Podcast and for many other things before that. Johanna, thank you again for joining us. Really glad to have you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye now.